I've always aimed to do what's right, following the simple idea, treat others the way you want to be treated. These are the principles I try to live by, and I've made an effort to stick to them. Yet, even though I never meant to hurt anyone, spoke harshly, or avoided responsibility for my mistakes, leading a good life turns out to be surprisingly tough. In summary, I consistently choose the morally upright path when faced with challenges. I present facts in a friendly manner when addressing others' errors and acknowledge my own faults. Despite my dedication to these values, a major life event took me by surprise. I was just going about my life, unaware of any warning signs, when it happened. Update. Returning from a 2-day conference in Texas, I was met with a surprise from my wife. In the kitchen, Casey and our kids were laughing. When I inquired about the source of their amusement, the atmosphere shifted. Casey didn't ask. She told me to sit down. She suggested that I take a seat, and she waved some papers in my face. There were adoption papers among them, and she explained that she wanted Jeff to adopt the kids. Assertively, she stated that she wasn't asking for anything except the house. According to Casey, I should sign the papers because she believed I wanted the best for the children, and then we could move on. She said all this in a cool and composed manner. My wife of 12 years had just handed me divorce papers and adoption forms for our 3 kids. My son, Devin, gave me a little smirk. Devin was 10. Joy, my daughter, didn't even bother looking at me. She was 9 and busy with her iPod, not bothered about losing her father. Patrick, my 7-year-old, was the only one speaking up. Patrick explained that Jeff had a big house and that they liked him, as if that would make everything okay. I just sat there, looking at Casey and the kids like they were crazy. I wondered if she was high or drunk, but there was no drink smell. So, why this sudden divorce? Casey dropped the papers on the counter and gave me a check for half our bank accounts, demanding the kids to take my bags to my truck. Unbelievable. They had packed my bags before I got home and waited for the right moment to spring it on me. I asked Casey with a slightly menacing tone if she thought I was going somewhere. She replied that I was moving out and asked if I hadn't been listening. I retorted, saying that this is my family's house. My parents said I could live here long before we got married. I didn't recall her name being on anything tied to this house. I didn't know why she wanted a divorce, but she wasn't taking my parents' house. I shouted that she could leave, but I was staying in this house. Casey rolled her eyes, and realizing she couldn't win, changed her orders and yelled at the kids to pack their bags. They had to change their plans and go to Jeff's house. I finally asked who in the heck Jeff was, and Casey responded that he's the man who's been with her while I'm at work. She wasn't guilty or remorseful. Casey showed nothing but disrespect and contempt for me. I looked at my kids for support, and my daughter told her brothers to hurry up, stating that Jeff can give them a better life. She added that Mom loves him, and so do we. My sons nodded in agreement. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. They all headed toward Casey's car. I told Casey not to touch that car, explaining that I pay for it, and it's in my name. I instructed my son Duck to call his sorry pals, and tell them to pick all of them up. Casey and the kids looked back at me, and all of them, the kids as well as Casey, flipped me the bird. I was beyond angry. I had worked for this family, and they ditched me for some money. I did what any normal man would do. I got really drunk. For the first time in my life, I hated somebody. I hated this Jeff guy with a passion. But more than him, I hated my family. I realized that it wasn't all him. My so-called family had chosen to betray me. Once I had sobered up the next morning, I cleaned myself up and went online to find a lawyer. I made an appointment for the next day at noon. They love him so much. I decided to give them what they asked for. My attorney looked over the agreement and told me to sign it before Casey changed her mind. I signed it, and my lawyer sent it back. Casey didn't even ask for child support. In the blink of an eye, with the stroke of a pen, I no longer had a wife or kids. My family tossed me aside like old bread. So much for staying together until the kids leave or growing old together. Update: 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Like everything else, I changed over time. I threw myself into work, returned to college, and earned my master's and PhD. Now, I was Dr. Billy, PhD, CPI. Many find accounting dull, but it somehow matched my life. I chose to start my own office, a boutique operation catering to high-net-worth clients with personalized attention. Through word of mouth, my client base grew, and by the end of my second year, I was saving a significant amount. I met Patty, a wonderful woman who shared my values and interests. A bit taller than Casey with curves in the right places. By the end of the fourth year, my firm needed more space, so I bought a 5-story office building instead of renting. Patty and I loved it so much that we got married on the 4th floor, a small but festive event. Perhaps I enjoyed myself too much because a few months later, Patty revealed she was pregnant. I wished for more alone time with my wife, as my life had been improving over the last 6 years. However, I was shocked when Casey served me with child support papers asking for $3,000 a month and $432,000 in back child support. It seemed absurd since I hadn't heard from them in 7 years. I laughed and handed the papers to my attorney. After a good laugh, my attorney called Casey's attorney, discovering Casey was broken alone. She had learned about my success, remarriage, and growing family. Casey's husband, Jeff, disappeared, and a week later she was served with divorce papers. Jeff refused to pay child support, claiming coercion by Casey to sign adoption forms. The judge declared the adoptions void. With their divorce finalized and money gone, I became Casey's next option. Casey involved my parents, who had stayed in touch with her since she left me. They sided with her without telling me about their contact. Casey played the actress, and my parents believed her story. My dad was the first to talk to me, urging forgiveness and family reunification. I reminded him of my remarriage, and my father suggested fixing my marriage to Casey, leaving Patty, and taking care of the kids. I lost respect for him, asked him to leave, and my mom made a similar request. They insisted that if I didn't take Casey back, I could move out, and they would give her the house. Despite an eviction notice, I didn't mind as the sale on my new house was closing the next day. Remarkably, when paying cash, people go the extra mile to get things done. Update. The next week, my parents came to the house and found it empty. Casey and her kids moved in the following day. It's been 2 years since then, and I haven't talked to my parents, Casey, or her kids. Patty and I now have 4 kids, and our business is thriving. This year, I received the Businessman of the Year award for our area. A wonderful photo of me and my family appeared in the local paper. Proudly, I accepted the award and credited Patty for most of it. I told the audience that without my wife Patty, there would be no award for me. She is my rock. While delivering my speech, my parents walked in with Casey. Casey approached the stage and called me a neglectful father. She told everyone that I abandoned my kids and her, blaming Patty for ruining our marriage. I believe my attorney anticipated this. He seemed to have a sense that Casey would use this event to attack me and promote her false story. He used a remote to control a projector at the side of the hall. Private investigators are quite resourceful in uncovering hidden details and using advanced technology. It was astonishing. A film started playing on the blank wall, showing Casey and her attorney discussing, revoking the adoption papers I had signed in the parking lot outside his office. She informed her lawyer that the court voiding them would be more beneficial than what she had given him that afternoon. They also discussed a plan to medicate Patty and film her cheating on me. Then Casey would come in and mend my broken heart. She also revealed how she manipulated my parents to be her puppets, threatening that they wouldn't see their grandkids if they didn't comply. When the short video ended, Casey's attorney, Finchett, tried to leave quietly through a side door, but was stopped by the chief of police. Some judges in the audience took an interest in the tape. I glanced at my parents, then walked over to my wife and kids, helped them with their coats, and left. Outside I kissed Patty, and we headed for the car. Just as I finished putting the kids in the car, my parents called my name. I got in my car without looking back and drove away. I didn't see them again until I was called to court to testify against Casey and her lawyer. After giving my testimony, I left the courtroom. My father was waiting outside. My father expressed how sorry he and my mother were and asked me to give them a chance to make things up. He mentioned the 3 kids who missed me, and the 4 grandkids they had never met. My father urged me to find it in my heart to forgive them and put the family back together. I just looked and turned away. After a moment, I stopped and told him I would think about it. Update. Casey received a 3-month jail sentence and 4 years of probation. Her lawyer was disbarred for conspiring to commit fraud against the court and me. The Child Welfare Department warned that the kids would go to foster care unless my parents or I took them. I asked my parents to take them. My dad said I'd have to forgive them someday. My dad questioned if wanting to be part of the grandkids' lives was so terrible. emphasizing that they were old and would miss most of their lives. He asked if I was heartless, unable to see that she made a mistake. I explained that there's nothing wrong with wanting to be in their lives, but Casey wasn't just mistaken. She was cold-hearted and got what she deserved. The kids chose him. I reminded him of his past words, saying that some things can't be forgiven, and he also mentioned the road to hell being paved with good intentions. I pointed out that he turned his back on me when Casey lied, cheated, turned the kids against me, and he still sided with her. Now, he wanted me to act like nothing had changed. I told him that he's old enough to know he made the wrong choice, and now he has to live with the consequences. That was a decade ago. Casey didn't learn her lesson. She married again, attempted the same deceit as she did with me, but it didn't end well. Her husband caught her with her lover and kicked them both. My kids with Casey are grown, and Devin and Patrick are in prison. Joy, before anything went wrong, came to our house, seeking to be part of our family. Patty believed Joy had been misled by her mother and insisted we take her in to help her live a moral and productive life. My parents met my kids before they passed away, leaving everything to my judgment. They asked me to distribute their assets fairly among their 7 grandchildren in my will. Patty and I will soon be empty nesters, and I'll cherish having my wife back all to myself. For some, Billy is seen as weak for not fighting to keep his family, or for walking away. Some things just aren't worth a fight.